administer and migrate virtual machines and vApps. All right, so I told you that this was sort of part two of these two nuggets on working with virtual machines and vApps. And in a way, this second part is, when you look at the exam objectives, I've kind of consolidated two objectives into one, the administer virtual machines part with the migrate virtual machines part, because I don't know, in a way they're almost kind of the same thing. When you're migrating VMs, that's part of the administration task. So I want to spend some time really helping you understand what those administration, just the activities are, and also what the different options are and how you can set resource controls and things like that. In this nugget, there are a wide array of different activities that we've really got to touch on. And so I'm just going to kind of list them here so that we can be prepared for what we're going to talk about. I want to spend a minute here talking about the virtual machine files, so that when you create a VM, what sorts of files get created and where are they at. And then also when we get down into the migration discussion, it's important to understand what the virtual machine requirements are for vMotion and also for storage vMotion, which is the vMotion, but instead of actually moving the, I guess I'll call it the brains of the machine, I'm moving the body of the machine from one data store to another. When we get into the interactive portion, what I want to do is spend some time talking about those virtual machine options that we sort of glossed over in that last nugget, and then also the resource controls that I told you I was punting on until this nugget. We're going to talk a little bit about virtual disks, how you can hot extend one, how you can convert its provisioning format, how you can work with storage policies just a little bit more. I know we've touched on storage policies already just a bit. And then we're going to work in those two topics associated with migrations and specifically the vMotion storage vMotion activities. What's interesting is that it's funny because vMotion, particularly when it first came out, was a really, really exciting activity, and people were really excited about seeing vMotion, but in a way there's really not that much to see. Most of the real excitement occurs under the covers and not necessarily in locations where there's anything to look at. So here we are back on our vSphere client, and I have taken the liberty of actually installing a copy of Windows Server 2008 onto VM1. That's the VM that we began the installation with in that last nugget. Now, I did this because I needed to complete this installation, the OS installation, so that I could go about actually installing the VMware tools. Again, I did that by right-clicking once the installation was complete, choosing Guest, and then Install Upgrade VMware Tools. You'll see here that the VMware tools are running and that they are current. This is important because those VMware tools are a part of the entire process that's involved with completing a vMotion between two different hosts. Now, before we get into that, I think what I'd like to do first is really give you an idea of the storage that these virtual machines may be using. Now remember, we were using VM Data Store 1 as the storage for this virtual machine that we created last time. If I right-click VM Data Store 1 and choose to browse the data store, you'll see that I have a couple of different files in here. One of which is the folder with the same name as the virtual machine that we created. And inside this folder are a whole series of different kinds of files that have been created in support of this virtual machine. Now, you should become intimately familiar with what these file extensions are. Some of them are more important, others less so. The ones that are the most important for you to understand are going to be pretty much in order. The VMDK file, which is the virtual disk file. This is generally the largest file on the system because indeed it's the entirety of that virtual disk. The VMX file is the virtual machine configuration file. Now what's interesting about this VMX file is that this VMX file is actually stored, the configuration for that virtual machine is stored in a text format. So I can actually take that VMX file and open it up inside of a text editor if I want and see information about how the configuration of this virtual machine should look. I'm going to do that now. I'm going to open up Notepad here for this VMX file, and you'll see here, let me turn on word wrap, you'll see here that there's a number of different settings that are associated with this file. Now these settings are kind of garbled up here, so Notepad's just a little challenging to use to actually see what's in the file. So let's move over here to WordPad, and I'll show you an interesting difference between the two. Take a look here. I'm going to do start at star so I can open up the file. There's that VMX file. And now inside of WordPad, I actually see these where each setting is highlighted one per line. every single configuration that you make to this virtual machine is going to be stored in this VMX file. So you'll see here, I can see, okay, here's the config version 8. That's VM version 8. This is PCI bridge 0, 5, 7. Let's see what else is down here. The IDE drive, the SCSI drive, the floppy drive, some Ethernet information here. You'll see these same VMX files associated with the VMs that you create inside of VMware Workstation. And the idea is that, this VMX file is intended to be portable and can or may not necessarily be associated with or move around